Welcome to Positive Talk Radio. Our goal is simple: to explore evolving ideas one conversation at a time. So, stay with us as right now we present. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I'm excited that we get a great guy to talk to today. His name is John Cole. He's an artist. He is an author. He is a speaker. And he's done all of those things in coordination with Allyson Roberts and Behind the Power. And it was. I understand it to be, and we were just talking before the show began, that I understand it was a great experience had by all. Would you, first of all, welcome to the podcast, John?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me back on. I've been looking forward to discussing the follow-up on how Behind the Power went, and of course, to have the opportunity to speak with you again.
By the way, have you noticed that? Have you gone to Instagram? Because you're prominently displayed there. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's impressive.
On a couple of episodes, we created a space for you because of the great things that you have to talk about and what you said. So it was and so we've got, like, on Instagram, we've got a bunch of episodes now. So that's really cool. And you are really a special dude, I gotta say.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And also, I have to point out that was the first time I've ever been introduced with the word speaker in any kind of introduction ever in my life. So hearing that out loud was actually pretty cool. I'm like, hey, I guess I am a speaker in a way now, huh?
Were you standing in front of a bunch of people?
I absolutely was. Yeah.
And were you speaking?
I was indeed, sir.
Then you are a speaker, sir.
Then I guess I am. So,
and I want to go through that with you a little bit, but let's talk about Behind the Power and Allyson Roberts and what she did there. I understand that the attendance was superior and the speakers were terrific and everybody had a really good time.
Right. Yeah. We so there's 13 of us all together speaking. That was including Allyson. So we all, as we've spoken about in the past, we all got together and we wrote chapters in the Behind the Power, You're Not Crazy, You're Powerful book, which is thankfully finally out, printed copy, because I know there's a lot of us that really enjoy that smell of book, right? So That's out right now in a printed copy. But in conjunction with that, we all met down at Atlanta, Georgia for the Behind the Power event. As part of that, we all had the opportunity to speak on various topics. For myself, it was codependency. For others, it might have been recovering from sexual trauma or talking about, what personal power means to them. And the turnout really was fantastic. The first year that Allyson hosted it, there might have been maybe 25 people. This year, it was more than double, which, considering we're still at the tail end of the COVID business and people are still a little bit weary of traveling, is really a substantial increase. We had not only that, but we had a few other speakers. Tracy Litt, who is also a very notable life coach. She was there and presented along with Allyson, which was really powerful for a lot of us. And we had the opportunity also to have breakout sessions. I myself had some folks come in and we talked about, some of the challenges you face when you transition from a long time career like I did, right? 36 years in the Coast Guard, transitioning to something that might not be as big. Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? My wife and Christy Farisi, both of them have been on your show before, had a breakout session to do artwork in terms of getting in touch with your inner child. Another very interesting subject. Great turnout for that. And we had a panel set up, multiple panels, as a matter of fact, where we talked through various subjects and we had that interaction with the audience, which again was a very powerful experience for a lot of people. And all that we squeezed into 3 short days in Atlanta. So it just really was an amazing experience. Allyson and her daughter, Laura, who acted as the MC, did an amazing job, not only keeping everybody on track, Kevin, but really bringing together such a wide variety of loving people and sincere people, and I don't mean just the speakers, but even those that made that commitment to come and really partake in this. And it wasn't just members of her unapologetic power group. We're talking folks that, had either through Facebook or through some other mechanism heard about the program, decided to invest in themselves and then come and participate. We got to meet some wonderful people that we had never met before. And that one thing that we all have in common is that we're all good people that really want to change our lives so that we can change and help other people. So totally wonderful event. And the beauty of it is we're going to be doing it again next year.
And that's awesome, by the way. Christine says hello.
Hi, Christine.
And she was also one of the speakers.
Yeah, she was.
And a really fine lady and a wonderful wife, I hear. Not that I know.
Yep. She's pretty good. She's pretty good. She's been hanging around with me now for coming up on 15 years. Matter of fact, our anniversary is coming up in a few weeks in November.
Congratulations. 15 years is a long time.
It is a very long time, but we're hanging in there.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And you know, and one of the things that you got to do was to be a speaker. Now I want to go through with you what it's like to speak in front of a group of people, but to the moments before you get on stage, the angst that we all go through when you are thrust upon the public eye and like that and to stand up in front of a bunch of people. What was going through your stomach and your heart and your mind shortly before before you hit the stage?
Well, I think it's a very well-known fact that public speaking is like the number one fear, right?
It really is.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm certainly not going to argue that fact. I think as much preparation, and I can only speak on my behalf, right? But as much preparation as I put in for the speech, and that was no joke, Kevin, hours and hours of prep time, right? Didn't just include the writing, but the revisions, and of course, practicing in front of my wife, practicing in front of my colleagues as part of Unapologetic Power, practicing one-on-one with folks, and just going down in the basement and reading this speech time and time again until the morning of, and I'm like, I know this thing backwards and forwards, right? So of course, as the time gets closer, you start to then think what could possibly go wrong. And well, right, a whole bunch of things go through your head, right? I mean,
of course, yeah.
Well, you trip going up stage.
That's a normal reaction or response of somebody is, it's not like I'm going to knock this out of the park. It's like, okay, what could go wrong? I could forget something. I could trip. I could, a whole myriad of things could go. Somebody could start heckling me, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, so. Absolutely. But in my head, I'm like, you know what, John, I know this. I got this. I've said it so many times, right? And even in my head, I'm like, I know the first sentence. As long as I can get past that first sentence, Kevin, I'm good. I'm golden, right? So I'm telling myself this, and right, next thing you know, next up on the stage, John Cole, and they'd read this little biography. So walk along, I'm hearing the applause. I'm starting to get butterflies, right? Because I'm about to step on. I get up on stage and I say that first line, and I'm like, oh, I got this, dude. I got this. And it's smooth sailing, smooth sailing, smooth sailing. I probably get about, remember, this is only like a 15-minute speech, so it's not super long, right? I probably got about 10 minutes into it. And I'm like, I'm moving towards the finish line, and I'm passionate, right? Because I know this thing really, really well. And then I get to one line, and no joke, Kevin, my mind literally went Sahara Desert.
It happens.
It was gone. It was like just 1 second it was there, and the next second it was gone. And of course, in those moments, it's probably the biggest terror that I could possibly think of when you're standing in front of people and your mind goes blank. So although I was told that I didn't look goofy for too long standing there, I was able to, and this really was the beauty of the moment, is what I found myself, what ended up happening in that moment was, because I couldn't think about what I was supposed to say, I found that inside myself, I was actually able to speak from the heart about the subject of codependency. And I actually used that difficult moment as a learning lesson for not only the audience, but myself. And I was very candid about it, and I haven't gone back and listened to the video again because I'm still not ready to listen to it. Right. I'll be honest, I'm just a little frightened to listen to it. But again, I was told it turned out well. But I do recall that in that brief moment of clarity, I felt more connected to myself and to the audience than I probably did as I was just reciting that memorized piece. So, towards the end, of course, all of a sudden I remembered the end of it and I was able to pick up and finish. Um, but what I found really, really interesting about that experience is that I think that there's a certain magic that happens when you're in a position like that, when you're in front of people and you really have something that you want to say that's important. And really, all of our speeches at the core had a very important subject that we all, as speakers, wanted to tell the audience. And I would venture, and I'm not going to put money on this, but I would venture that the majority of the speakers at some point this happened to.
Oh,
Right.
sure.
So they're reading along and you could almost tell when you listen to people talk, it's like the conversation we're having right now. None of this is scripted. And it really sounds, in my ears anyway, like a legitimate conversation, as opposed to, if I was reading from this book or you were reading off of a script. And I think people can tell that. And I think that conversations like this are more meaningful because they're from the heart. And I think that's what happened to me. And to be honest with you, although I was a little disappointed with my performance immediately afterwards, after talking to some folks and really thinking about it, in a way, I'm kind of glad that I went Sahara Desert on that speech, because I think ultimately it turned out to be a much better product.
Oh,
So
I agree with you totally. As a matter of fact, so does Christine. She says
yeah,
you faced it with grace and dignity. He showed
thank you.
up vulnerable and knocked it out of the park. And like I said before we began, that when that happens, and it happens to a lot of people all the time, but people are rooting for you that
Yeah.
they're in the audience. It isn't an adversarial thing. They want you to do well, and they feel really good when you do knock it out of the park.
Yeah, and I don't yeah, and that's a really good point that I think, people like me that tend to feel as if we need to be perfect all the time. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, and that's some of the things I'm working through is why do I have this feeling that I need to be perfect and everything has to be just spot on or else I'm not going to bother to do it, right? But the fact of the matter is you're absolutely right. I don't think perfection has nothing to do with anything that we're doing because in the long run, nobody really cares if you're doing it perfect or not. What they care about is whether you're a good person and what is it you're trying to say,
Exactly.
you
The
know?
the only time that it was imperative that I actually follow the script
Mhm.
was when I did Shakespeare, because it is so out of the English language
Yes.
that if you don't do it correctly and with every line, then you're it's gonna come off really terribly. But other than that,
No, other than
um,
that, and even then, Hollywood will take Shakespeare and they will rewrite it completely, and you'll watch it. It'll be with Sylvester Stallone, and you'll be like, "Oh my god, this is like this action film, and it's Shakespeare for heaven's sake!" Right? So,
yo, Adrian, to
yeah,
be or
exactly,
not to be. Yeah.
exactly. So,
And but it's important. But I'm glad, from a experiential point of view, I'm glad that you had that
yeah,
experience, because it taught you a lot, and also the audience, it wasn't lost on the audience,
no,
but they were real pleased that you were speaking from your heart, and it all made sense, and that
right.
actually was better than the scripted part. I'm willing to bet.
Yeah, again, I haven't yet gone back to listen to it, but that's probably the case, and I think that would be, next year, we're going to have additional folks that haven't stepped on stage before. Um, I would wager that'll be the case. I'm sure there'll be some veterans and then some new folks. But I think if anything, that would be my advice, or I should say my support that I would provide to these folks is that, yeah, I think it's important to have some kind of speech prepared, but maybe not be so tied to it that if you do find yourself in that position where the words aren't coming like you have them scripted, that you really can slide back into just talk about the subject as opposed to reciting about the subject, because I did learn that that's really where I jam myself up. So
Yeah, and some people, Christine says some people even thought it was intentional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
why would you put yourself through that on purpose?
Yeah, I know, but like I said, I'm glad it turned out the way it did. I mean, ultimately, there was a ton of lessons for me, and I feel, better for it.
Well, and see, that's one of the things that I do, and that's why I do these live,
Mhm.
is because I don't want them to be scripted.
Yeah.
If I make a mistake, I make a mistake, and that's okay.
Yep.
If we get to talking about something that doesn't make any sense, that's okay. We just do do the best we can,
I
and
do I do that so often, Kevin. I don't know how many times I've been in conversations and I'll even stop myself and say, "What the heck am I talking about?" Because it's no longer even makes any sense to me. That's funny.
well, as we get older, and I don't know about you, but I'm at the age where and a word that you know how your mind works, that it just kind of shows up,
Mhm.
and you think about something and it's just there.
Yeah.
I'm getting to the point in my agedness that there are times when I call up on a word and it just doesn't show up,
Hmm.
and so and that can happen to you, especially when you're on stage.
It can absolutely happen to you, but it's good to have a sense of humor about it as well. Because you're right, it is what it is, and people they will support you. So.
They will. And you wrote the chapter in the book that is just out.
Mhm.
Was your chapter about?
Well, my chapter, it's called "A Grain of Sand," and it ties in with the speech, and it's about the codependency issue, and where a lot of um, where I believe my codependency issues really start. Right, like most of us, trauma kind of underpins who we are. And trauma doesn't have to be big, it can be very small. It can be something as simple as, like, for me, never being able to find anybody to like me in school. I never really had a girlfriend in school. And although that doesn't seem like a traumatic thing, it can change the way you see yourself, right? If you never have a girlfriend, then you might begin to believe that you're not good looking. That might not be the case, but you can then begin to think that you're not, right? And once you start to have these thoughts that you're not a certain way, that can carry with you. And as those things compound over the years, if they're never healed or reconciled or anything like that, then you begin to think about the world differently. And then when that happens, it can lead to some bigger problems later on. So,
I hated being a teenager.
oh, yeah. If I ever had to go back and do it again, it would never be going back to my teenage years. I can tell you that. Oh, that was horrible. High school years. Oh my God, the worst.
It was terrible because you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
and until you know it, and but in order to know it, you've got to go through it.
Yep.
But it's scary to go through it, and and it's like, and women don't understand what it's like to be awkward 14, 15-year-old kid with pimples and stuff, and then to walk up to a group of girls and ask one of them to dance or they don't get how much courage it takes to be able to do that, unless you are a narcissist who thinks that those, everything rises and sets with you. But that was a most horrible time.
Yeah.
So it would take me hours sometimes at a dance to get the courage and then they would dance and they wouldn't even look at you. It was like, oh, well, this is kind of pointless. So, but growing up, it's hard. Um, and so, what do you do? But you got through it, and you married a lovely lady, and it would be nice for us if we could look at the total of our life and then go back and do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you could reverse things, right? If we were born with everything that we needed to know first, it certainly would take care of a lot of the challenges moving along. You know what I mean? And maybe it would clear
Exactly.
up some of the problems that we find ourselves in now. But I mean, it's that's the interesting thing is it's never too late for any of this stuff, and even the trauma and the healing that goes along with it, it's never too late for that. And sometimes I think specifically the older we get, and I'd be the first to admit, I don't know how many times I've used that excuse, well, I'm too old, right? I'm too old to do this. I'm too old to heal. I'm too old to go back and heal my 3-year-old inner child, or I'm too old to start a new career as a graphic designer, or I'm too old to be a painter. The truth is, you're never too old for any of that stuff.
Nope.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I might be, and I'm not even too old to run a marathon, quite frankly. I mean, I still got
Oh,
knees. I might not be fast, but I could still do it. You know what I mean? Heck, I mean, you got people that are in wheelchairs that do marathons. So the point
that's the
being
point.
is that you're never too old for anything. I think where we run into problems is when our mind tells us and gives us that excuse. Well, you can't. And as soon as your mind says you can't, you might as well just hang up your shoes and be done with it, because right there it's you're burning your own bridge,
Needlessly.
needlessly, right? So what's really special, I think, with Allison's program, and this is a change that I've noticed over the last year, is she's starting to draw folks that are a lot younger than what you would think. Right now, we've probably got 3 or 4 folks that are under 21 in the group.
Oh, really?
Yes, which is, when you think about it, quite an amazing thing, because when you think back to when you're 19 or 20 years old, and we were just talking about that, and how difficult it is for boys or girls to go through that process of learning who we are, because really, I'm not even sure if I even know who I am, and I'm 57, but going back and looking when I was 21, I mean, the decisions I were making, Kevin, were terrible decisions, right? But that was only because I didn't know any better. But if I had the training that I'm getting now when I was that age, then most likely I would be making much better decisions, and I wouldn't be feeling and having the thoughts that I'm having now.
Yeah.
So,
No, that makes perfect sense.
yeah. So these folks that are taking that leap of faith and starting early, and I'm seeing some amazing progress already with some of these younger folks that are already starting to get it, and they're starting to apply them to their lives now. And I can just imagine the caliber of these people, and what they're going to be like when they're in their 30s, their 40s, and their 50s. That's really where the future of America lies, is not in any old young person. I mean, nothing against the younger generation, because they're unique, just like we were unique, when our parents were our age. But I think those folks that are really willing to examine themselves and start to heal some of their trauma early, or at least recognize it and make some changes based on different tools and techniques, those are the folks that are going to make a huge difference. And that's where a lot of this change is going to take place.
Oh, I agree completely. It's we've got a lot of young kids are there's a change happening. At
Mhm.
least, yeah, I feel it and I've noticed it. There is a change happening in the young people that are growing up. They seem to be a lot wiser than we were when I was growing up, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't exactly know why either, but I do tend to agree with you. I think that there's something that they're sensing that a whole bunch of us might have missed somewhere.
Well, and and it's
Like,
not so much even that we should be ashamed or that we should feel badly because
hmm,
we missed it. It was because it just wasn't up. It wasn't possible for us because nobody was talking about this stuff the way that you are now and the
right.
way we are now, and it really is an important aspect of who we are.
Well, yeah, maybe that's definitely a better way of putting it. And as much as I dislike some of the trends on social media, on the other hand, there is the advantage of expanding communications and expanding that cultural awareness, which we didn't have. I think that I mean, my exposure, for example, to other cultures as a kid literally was National Geographic magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, I got my first exposure to Stonehenge, to Africa, to Egypt by looking at the foldouts in National Geographic.
Well, you're a decade younger than I am, but I remember there used to be something in school that was called an encyclopedia.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there was a whole row of those, and
Mhm.
that's what when I went to a school where you had two grades in the same classroom,
Okay.
fifth and sixth grade and seventh and eighth grade. And so when they were teaching the seventh graders, I would go over and get an encyclopedia.
Hmm.
And that's how I learned back then. I learned how to read, and I learned about history and all of those things. And now kids have got so much information at their disposal, and I think it's changed, and it is, and it's a positive change. It's also a negative change. So I really don't honestly know how to feel about it.
Well, I mean, well, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's definitely a dual-edged sword. But going to the positive side, I mean, uh, the encyclopedia is a great example. National Geographic is a great example. But those are are one-way pushes of information, right?
Right.
So you want to learn about something, you pull it out, you read about it. But I think the benefit today is that if I wanted to know more about, I don't know, Nigeria or Zaire or, Ireland, I literally can go on my phone right now, find somebody who lives there and strike up a chat
Yeah.
and get a live video like right now. You know what I mean? And that is a very powerful thing. Um, and the same, I think, applies to world events. Now we do and tend to get sucked into the bias of the news, right? I mean, I haven't been because I pretty much turn that to the off position. Um, However, if you really want the ground truth about anything, you can bypass the news and go directly to those that are there and really speak to them. You know what I mean? And that is power right there. And I think when you're young, you're motivated, and you really want to make change in a positive way, and you use those tools, then you really understand what's going on in the world, and all that other stuff then just becomes background noise. You know what I mean? It's like you don't need that anymore. I can go talk to Kevin who lives in Seattle and find out exactly what the hell's going on in downtown Seattle. Why would I need to turn on Fox, CNN, or any of that other stuff?
Exactly.
If you're there.
And yep, I agree.
Um,
And it's a beautiful world we live in. It really can be. And the information age is here to stay, and it's important.
yeah.
But you're right. We can do, what I see in Seattle anyway, because I'm not everywhere, but what I see is young people that have a different attitude about race. They have a different attitude about sexual orientation and all of that stuff. Then it's different than it used to be, and they have a much broader. So I think it's really cool that there's some young people that are working with Allison, because they're
Yeah.
going to get a head start over everything that because I didn't figure any of this out until I was like 42.
Yeah, that's what it's because it's like you were saying, we didn't have exposure to it. The we didn't have it laid out for us. We didn't even know there was options in some particular cases. When you're taught a certain way, that's the only reality you know. You only know what you're taught. I mean, honestly, unless
Yep.
unless you're literally going someplace to learn it firsthand, you only know what your authority figures teach you.
I had, and this goes back 20 years, but I had no idea about meditation, about quieting your mind, and all the practices that Allison works with and teaches, and what you're learning and are beginning to teach as well. Which that's got to be exciting for you, that you are now in a place where you are an author and you're a speaker, and you're getting to the point where you're going to be able to impart your knowledge to other people. That has to make you feel powerful and fulfilling.
Well, it's with with great responsibility. It's you have to just be humble with that, because like anything, you only know what you know, and you only know your own personal perspective on things, right? So I'm always very cautious about what I say, because I certainly would never want to lead somebody down the right path. I'm not a coach by any stretch of the imagination, right? And I would never proclaim to be a coach. Um, I leave the coaching to the professionals, right?
And
However, if somebody says, "Hey, John, what do you think?" I don't mind sharing my perspectives on things, right? I'd like to think that having been alive for this long, I, maybe know one or two things. Just saying.
you know more than just one or two things. Like I said, it would be great if we knew what we knew now and weren't to be a teenager again. But earlier today, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of David Essel,
Mhm.
and he has been a thought leader for like 40 years and has like 12 books out and stuff. And we talked about what it was like in the 80s and 90s to be part of the new thought movement that didn't really exist at the time.
Right.
And he was like, he stuck with it over that period because he felt very strongly about what he believed about. And it's amazing that people are willing to do that and to hang with what they believe because they know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. If anything that you feel passionate about, anything that you feel connected to, it's very hard to shake from it, right? Even if the rest of the world is saying, "Dude, that's like the dumbest idea you ever heard." If you're passionate about it, I mean, that's the thing, right? That's why people do what they do. That's why I stuck with the Coast Guard for so many years. I mean, my story basically is I joined the Coast Guard because I felt that I had to rescue my first wife and my child from poverty. I mean, because I had gotten married right out of high school,
Oh,
and my
wow.
daughter was born within 6 months of that, and I didn't have a job. I mean, I literally went to the yellow pages and picked the Coast Guard out, not knowing what the heck I was getting myself into. And it wasn't supposed to be a 36-year career. It was going to be a 4-year obligation, right? Um, but obviously that turned out a little bit different. But what I found with the Coast Guard, just like with any kind of passionate pursuit, is that there are some things that really end up becoming very meaningful because they have such a great impact, and they could potentially have a great impact. So something like the gentleman you're referring to there, I can definitely see that, where that idea or that belief is either so very strong, or it just makes so much sense that at some point somebody's going to say, "Hey, this is going to be a thing," then I'm just going to keep following it, right? So it makes sense to me.
I think that we need to make a rule that kids are not allowed to get married right out of high school. How do you how do you,
Um,
how do you have any idea? You're still a child yourself. How do you grow up when you're in your late teens? I mean, in my high school, we had a bunch of people get married right out of high school. There are two couples that are still left
mm,
after 40 years. Everybody else is in their second, third, or fourth relationship, and that sort of thing. And it happens.
yeah, yeah. I wouldn't change any of it. I mean,
Well, certainly not your daughter.
yeah. Well, I mean, even the relationship. I mean, I don't even know if my first wife would even argue with me with that. I think that there's value in everything that we do,
Yep,
even if we
that's true.
find out that the
That's true.
decisions weren't the best because of our youth or whatever. I think that we both learned something important about ourselves from that. And although, you know, we probably could have made better decisions up front, I think there are certain behaviors that I did not repeat because of that. Of course, I ended up getting married a second time and did repeat that behavior again. So I wasn't exactly perfect on my side of the aisle,
Well,
but
but the thing is, life is a experience, and it is designed to be that,
yeah,
so that we can learn everything that we came here to do and came here to learn over time.
yep.
And so it's important, whatever that experience is, that we talk a lot about grief, and we talk a lot about um, uh, PTSD and being unhappy and that kind of stuff. But our experiences are what makes us unique and makes us special.
It is. And you know what? I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I just had this thought that I wanted to bring up really quick, is that one of the things we also need to learn is to unlearn behaviors. And
Yes.
what I mean by that specifically is, I don't know how often folks talk about this, but we are also products of our upbringing, right? We're products of our parents, we're products of our teachers. A lot of that. So what I'm saying is a lot of who we are is based on other people's perceptions of who they wanted us to be, right? So we end up becoming or demonstrating, characteristics of our fathers, of our mothers, of our friends, right? And oftentimes we don't even know that we're doing that. So sometimes we need to unlearn those behaviors,
Yep.
right?
One.
And
Yep.
yeah, so I think that's something that we should think about too. So not only learning from our past mistakes, for example, but also maybe considering, and I think Allison uses this example a lot. Do we really like the foods that we eat, or are we eating the foods that we eat because we were taught to eat them?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, you like Brussels sprouts, Kevin, or are you only eating them because your dad ate Brussels sprouts? You know what I mean? Questions like that. Um, I mean, it's just something to think about.
Well, I got a good example for you.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was a baseball player and I was also a football player. And in my home, when I was growing up, my mother, regardless of how good we did at something,
Mhm.
she would always throw in a but at the end of that.
Mm.
It was always, well, you did this really well, but you could have done this better and this could. And I asked her years later why she did that. And she said, well, I didn't want you to get a big head,
Mm.
wanted to keep us in check. And so I took it the attitude that it wasn't ever good enough. Because regardless of how well I did, I'll give you an example. I was playing right field on the baseball team, and there was a guy at second base, and there's a high fly ball hit to right field fairly deep, and the guy at second base tagged up at second base to run to third base. Well, I had a strong arm, and so I threw it to third base, and we threw him out. And so we got him out, and then we went back to the dugout. And so the coach came by and he said, that was a great throw. And instead of saying, thanks, coach, I appreciate it, I said, yeah, but I missed the cutoff, man. So it was so ingrained in me to do something, to say something that was self depreciating, even though it was a great thing that I did. I couldn't accept the fact that it was, and just leave it at that and say, thanks, coach, appreciate it.
Right.
And that's something that has followed me for a long time. And it wasn't until like 5 years ago that I figured out, aha,
Yep.
that's why I would do that.
Yep.
Because it used to drive me crazy.
Yeah. That's exactly why. That's exactly why. It's a learned behavior. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a shame that that happened, but that I think it happens a lot. I think that that's not an uncommon story. I mean, and it really is difficult for some of us to just respond with a thank you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that is a learned response
Yeah.
that we have to recognize that they're not blowing smoke,
Right.
or they're not saying it just to be nice, that they actually mean it,
Yeah.
and that we should accept it.
Yeah. Somebody says, "Hey, Kevin, you look really nice tonight." Thank you. Yeah, but I don't know. This doesn't look right on me. Or yeah, but does my butt look too big? Or yeah, does this tie too small? You know what I mean? We do tend to do that instead of just taking that appreciation for what it is, which is just somebody admiring the way you look. It's simple. Thank you is exactly what you need to say.
And you know what I love about these conversations sometimes is they go round robin and
Mhm.
go back to where we started, because I'm sure that after you finish your speech, because it wasn't exactly planned out exactly the way, and it wasn't perfect the way that you planned it, that the first thing that you said when somebody, or thought at least, when somebody said, um John, that was a heck of a speech. You did a wonderful job. I'm sure your first response was, yeah, but is that true?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Yeah, I didn't let that go right away. It took, but to my credit, the old me, I probably would have stewed on that for days. But I probably let that go the next morning.
Well, and Jennifer says, by the way, Jennifer, you need to call me. We need to get you on the show again. I completely identify with your butt story. That's what I did too for years. And then she says, "Yep, that's exactly what you did." It was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Yeah,
You
I
know,
could have done, but the fact of the matter is, you did exactly
yeah,
what it was designed to end up with, and
right,
stuff, and you really had an impact on people."
yeah, yeah. As did everyone. It just, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it 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 is a very difficult thing to do when you're not used to it. It's difficult when you've grown up in environments like yours where there's always these conditions or these added bonuses of the butt, right? It's a butt bonus.
Yes,
Sounds funny when I say it, but
that's true.
yeah,
Because it's an ass thing. It's not it should
yeah,
not be. We should never follow a compliment with a butt because it makes a butt out of you and me. Because it
yeah, pretty
needs to
much. Yeah,
be, yeah, it needs to be. If you're going to make a compliment, it should be a positive thing, and just let it sit there.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly what it ought to be. Because you're right. People don't say compliments for nothing. They tend to mean them. And if they don't mean them, you pretty much can tell just by the tone of their voice if they're being sarcastic or something. You will know if it's not a legitimate compliment,
Or they won't say a thing.
or they won't say a thing. Exactly.
But when you have an impact on somebody and it's a positive impact and they feel compelled
Hmm.
to say thank you
Right.
or that was great or what a wonderful dinner you made, it should be just, well, thank you,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Yep.
That's what we should all do, but we don't do that because we're trained.
Yep.
What's their motive? What's your ulterior motive
Yeah.
for saying that?
Yeah.
So but
So yeah.
but that's why we all need a coach.
Yep. Yeah. Trust is a big thing, and trust is something that I mean, it's hard to earn trust. It's hard to trust other people sometimes, and I think, of course, a lot of us we do tend to feel that we're betrayed quite often, either by people that we know, people that we love, or even the world around us. Right? It's very hard to trust anything anymore. At least that's what it feels like sometimes. But I would argue that a lot of that is all smoke and mirrors. I think that when it comes to other people, uh, in my life anyway, um, I've had very I don't even know if I could think of one person that I've ever had uh, that deep of a betrayal from. You know what I mean? And maybe I've just been fortunate in my life, but I think generally speaking, the majority of the people I've ever met have always had my best interest in mind. Whether or not we ever got along, or whether or not we stayed married, or whether or not whatever. There was very rarely any ulterior motives other than just people being people. So, it does beg the question, is a lot of our trust issues real, or are they just make believe, right? So, and the reason I bring that up is because, when you do this type of work and you start to think about your thoughts and question your belief systems and you really start to dig into that, it those are good questions to ask, right? Maybe you're not a trusting person because your parents weren't trusting people, which goes back to what I was speaking to earlier. Maybe that is a behavior that you were taught, right?
Mhm.
Which then affects your relationships now, right? And just by examining that one simple thing and just changing that thought and that belief, if the belief it has been that you don't trust people because your parents never trusted anyone, maybe the answer is you just change that belief and then you start to trust people and then your relationships get better, your money story gets better, your everything starts to get better, right? So it's this ripple effect that these things can have on you just by making a pivot, right? um but trust
Yeah.
is a big thing as well.
No, I agree 100%, and, one of the things that always, interests me is that we will interpret what somebody is telling us in the view of how we want it to be or where our past says it should be, rather than what they actually said, what they actually meant.
Right.
And so if we have as an example, a poor image of ourselves,
Mhm.
then we are going to look at it from that lens rather than a legitimate compliment or a legitimate, that was a very nice thing to say. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, we take everything personally. We do, and of course, I'm making a huge generalization there, but I think we kind of do. We tend to absorb everything from the outside and we internalize it to make it about us. When the fact is that's not true. You know,
That's true. Oh
the
yeah.
world. I mean, and I think you've mentioned this before in some of your podcasts. I mean, the world isn't out to get you, Kevin.
No.
The Russians aren't out to get you. The president isn't out to get you, right? The guy that's living in the house next door is not out to get you. I mean, there are people in the world that might be, but the odds of that actually happening are infinitesimal. You know what I mean? Um, the same thing with uh, other people's perceptions of you, right? Whether they have opinions of you or not is, quite frankly, none of your business. That's got nothing to do with you. That's got to do with them, right? What
Yep.
they think about you is their problem. It's got nothing to do with you. You are who you are.
Unless you're not, because you don't know who you are. And that's why, a lot of us run into that issue of, we perceive ourselves differently than other people perceive us. It's the darndest thing,
Yeah.
because we don't perceive ourselves as other people think more of us than we think of ourselves, and that's a real problem.
And we can work to fix that. And what I
Yes.
mean by fix that, I mean change that perception, because I think you're absolutely right. I think we do. We tend to lowball ourselves a lot, for one thing. I'm never going to be a great artist, even though everybody around me says I do great pictures and paintings of fish. I don't think they're that great, but everybody likes them. So why is my opinion of my fish so low? Right. So that's clearly something that I need to work on. Right. So that's a self-esteem issue. That's a self-care or a self-approval issue. That's all this different stuff. And it all kind of goes back to the trauma that I experienced growing up, right? Whether or not it was from childhood or later on in adolescence or even in my early years, right? Why do I feel like that? Right. What are the
Yep.
thoughts behind that? What was the actions that might have resulted from something that changed my worldview about that particular thing? And when you look at that and you examine it and you start to heal that, that's when you start to change yourself. And that's when things start to align. And even if they don't align, again, at least you can come to the realization that it doesn't really matter what other people think about you. The important thing, Kevin, is that you love yourself. The important thing is that you realize you have that self power, right? You are your own world.
Yeah.
Honestly, you are. And when people say, "Geez, Kevin, what is this all about you?" Well, the answer ought to be, "Well, yeah, it is."
At the end of the day.
I mean, at the end of the day, it is. I mean, this is the only life you're going to be given, Kevin. So if you're going to spend your whole life people pleasing or feeling bad about yourself or, trying to do everything you can to make other people happy, well, number one, you're never going to make anybody else happy because happiness is an internal thing. Number two, you doing it for everybody else and not for yourself, then you're going to sit back when you're 99 years old and you're taking your last breath going, well, what the crap? I just missed out on all this stuff I could have been doing, you know? Uh,
Yep. And you know what's interesting, John, is that you just said it with your paintings. Your
mm,
paintings are amazing. What you do is just remarkable. I could not do what you do, regardless of how hard I tried to get at it, because you have a gift. But it's easy when you have a gift to downplay your gift because you can do it well and it comes easily to you. So therefore, it's not as big of a gift as if somebody else, if when you look at somebody else who could maybe be a songwriter or a singer or something like that, you say they've got a great gift. My gift is okay. You know what I mean? But your gift is as good and as important as anybody else's gift. We just downplay it because it comes easy for us.
Well, yeah, it comes easy for us, and then we, like you were saying, we just have different perceptions of ourselves. So it's like what you do, I can't do, or I could do, but it wouldn't nearly be as good as how you do it, right?
And you know, the first thought that comes to my head just
Yeah.
innately when you said that is,
Mhm.
"Oh, come on, John. It's easy. Everybody can do what I
Yeah.
do."
And everybody can do the paintings that I do. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but I mean, what I'm saying is I'm agreeing with you here. I think it goes back to what we were saying, right? It's and what I'm saying, it's understanding how important each of us are, and that what we're able to provide to our for ourselves and for other folks, it doesn't really matter what other people think of it, because if we're happy with it, the rest is going to follow. So if I can get to the point, and I'm working on it, I really am working on it to get to the point where I can do a piece of art that I don't really care whether or not Kevin McDonald likes it or not because I like it,
Mhm.
then that's exactly where I need to be, because now I'm doing it because I love to do it, and because I have that passion instilled into it, there will be people that want that art. And if
Yeah.
it's not for you, and if it's not for her, and it's not for him, that's okay, but there are people that want it. Same thing with your podcast, right? You
Right.
have a specific audience, and this other guy here might not wanna listen to it because he prefers true crime or something. Well, that's on him, that ain't on you,
Got
right?
nothing to do with me.
It's got nothing to do with you, right? So, that's really where we all need to be, because once we realize that, then we're going to ramp up a huge quantum notch in happiness, because now we're finally doing those things that bring us happiness, and we don't have to worry about that other stuff because it doesn't matter.
I have to say that I don't know, John, that if there would be 2 guys having a conversation like this anywhere else in podcast land or anywhere else in the world because, you know, you're very competent and very good at what you do, and we can have a conversation like this. It means something,
Mhm.
and that's what is important for me. And the way I look at it is my job is to shine a light on you and to do something together with you and to create something great, and it's up to the universe to find people who want to listen to it.
Yeah.
Not my job.
Nope. Nope. And if they need to hear it, they'll find it. If they don't, that's okay.
Exactly. And
Yep.
I can't have an ego around it
No.
because that's not what it's all about.
No. Hey, you got one listener right here, so that's
Well, you know what's interesting is I got to tell you, John. You know, uh, the audience is growing and people that are finding us, but because I don't do these consistently at the same time every time,
mhm.
you've had more people listening to us today than the by far than normal.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yes, indeed. And part of that's because you guys have got such a tight knit group
Mm.
that work with Allison and that are so supportive of each other, which is really important. But there are others that are listening and they're staying with it because the information that you and I are figuring out is important.
Great. I'm so happy to hear that. That's wonderful. Really makes me very happy. Thank you.
Well, as well, you should be. Now, what's the next? You know, you're going to do Behind the Power next year. What's your chapter going to be about?
Well, I'm not quite sure what that chapter is going to look like yet. I met with Allison the final day of the Behind the Power event because I was super excited to try this again. I thought my chapter for this book turned out really well. I think my speech, as we talked about, turned out pretty well. And I know that I have a lot more personal work that I need to do this year. What I really want to focus on for me is resolving some of my historically misidentified anger issues. I think a lot of the anger issues that I've suffered throughout a lot of my younger years that led up into my into my 30s and 40s were really based on some significant childhood trauma that I'm only recently uncovering.
Mm.
Some things that I didn't even know existed. They at the time didn't seem very significant. However, the more I'm looking at them, the more I'm thinking that they're a lot larger than I thought, or they impacted me for a lot longer of a period of time. So I want to focus in more on that. So that's really going to be my focus for this year. And during that, whatever falls out, I'm not quite sure chapter wise. I don't know what the subject matter is specifically going to be. Some folks had suggested maybe speaking a little bit about, the actual transition part from the military to the civilian side and some of the emotional fallout from that, because that was a very difficult period for me. And I know there's a lot of veterans specifically that have gone through even more significant trauma just making that transition. Um, that could be an option. But I don't know. I can certainly keep you in the loop as we move forward and let you know how that goes.
Well, would you make me two promises? Number one is that you'll return to this show often.
Sure. Absolutely.
And the other one is that I really like the concept of doing that transition. It affects every,
Hmm.
not every, but most men on the planet.
Hmm.
It impacted my father greatly. It impacted me greatly, because as you go from being, I mean, I traveled the country. I had a company credit card. I flew on airplanes. I talked to vice presidents and of restaurant chains and companies, and could at a drop of a hat get people to go out to dinner with me, and we'd spend several $100s, drop the credit card, nobody cared, and all that kind of stuff. I was pretty hot stuff back then. And I ended up as a bus driver in Seattle, talking to the bottom 3% of the company, or the population.
Hmm.
But so there's a transition that we all have to go through.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with my dad. Same thing happened to you after 36 years
Yeah.
in the military. I think that would be, and then figuring out what you're going to do with yourself to keep yourself alive and be meaningful.
That probably would be a really good subject to investigate. I think over the course of my career, I've known probably half a dozen folks that, retired after 30 years of service and within that first 6 months passed away. So it does happen. And unfortunately, it happens probably more often than people know. And that's because it's such a significant shock to the system. People tend to feel worthless. Um, on the veteran side, especially those that see combat, it's even worse.
Oh,
It's just
yeah.
there's a higher rate of suicide. There's a higher rate of drug abuse and everything else, and it's an unfortunate side effect of that type of situation. So yeah, it might be really worth my time to really dig deep into that and investigate that a little bit more.
There's a ton of stuff that goes along with it, including the suicides,
Mm.
including the um the the drug abuse and
Yeah.
the alcohol abuse and all of that when you no longer have anywhere to go, and also marital issues. Um
Oh, that's another one. Yep. Yep.
because my mother and father, my father, when he worked 6 days a week for Nordstrom for most of his adult life, and then when he came home, when he retired, he was now invading her space.
Yeah.
And so they ended up splitting up for about 6 months because of that.
Right.
And Christine, you could help so many, and I think that's really is true.
Yeah.
That really is true.
Yeah.
And so I'll help you in any way I can, young man.
I appreciate that.
So, and you've got a good following of people that follow you, and you should be very proud of who you are.
Thank you.
And there's the steps you're working to make changes for yourself. By the way, go to AllysonRoberts.com and you can find out more about her work, and the entourage of people that she has that are really, I can't tell you how outstanding a group of people you are.
Thank you. Thank you. And remember, you can now get the Behind the Power, You're Not Crazy, You're Powerful hard copy book.
Yay.
Available on Amazon.
It's available on Amazon, and it actually sold. It sold really well in the very beginning. So
Yeah. When we went live in right before, I think it was a week before the event, it hit, I think, 4 or 5 different #1 bestsellers on the Kindle version. So we did extremely well that first day. So for everyone that did support us and that got a copy of the Kindle version, thank you very much, because I guess that means I'm a best-selling author too. Who knew?
you need to put that on your resume.
I know. I need to add that in there so folks can see it.
Let's see, a artist, best-selling author, and a speaker.
And the speaker, yep.
A keynote speaker. Exactly.
Keynote speaker, yes.
There you are. So, John, thank you much for being here. Before we go, though, I want you to be able to say to your friends, family, and anybody else that's listening now or in the future, you tell them anything that you'd like them to know.
Well, just keep dreaming big, love each other, and don't be afraid to change your mind, because not everything you think is true. That's it.
Simple. That's it.
That's it.
And that is so true. And research everything.
Research everything. Oh, and happy Halloween too.
Yes, indeed. And I know what I wanted to mention too, because Halloween is a precursor to Thanksgiving.
Yes.
We're going to have an election in next week and stuff. And what I really would like everybody to do is let's put all of that stuff aside. Let's make a commitment not to talk politics at Thanksgiving. Let's try and work together and bridge the gap that we have as a family or as families, so that we can work together to achieve great things, which we can only do if we do it together.
I agree. Amen to that, Kevin.
That's my soapbox. So there we are. So
works for me.
And thank you, John. I really appreciate you coming on, and you're gonna have to do this again, because it's a lot of fun for me.
All right, yeah, you can count on it. I'd love to do it.
Awesome.
Great.
Again, John Cole, thank you very much. And go to, by the way, John, what's your website?
Oh, it's johnrobertcole.com.
And there's some stuff you can buy there, and some artwork that you can see and stuff like that. Please, you should go there. And if you have a mind, go buy something. That would be fun.
That would be awesome.
Yes. And hold on, somebody made a comment. Amen
from Christine. All right.
Very nice. So thank you so much. And you, John, if you'll stay right there, I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of PositiveTalkRadio.net. Please visit our website, oddly named PositiveTalkRadio.net, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to one another, because each other's